We are commencing legal action against Mrs. Meghan Markle. Her televised allegations, particularly the Oprah interview, have inflicted undue harm upon the royal family. An apology no longer suffices. The matter will now proceed through
The silence inside the palace was not peaceful. It was heavy, deliberate, and final. Meghan had not shouted. She had not demanded. She had made a silent appeal through a private request for renewed family recognition, hoping Charles would soften before the royal line hardened forever. But the king's answer came like a door closing in stone. No return, no reversal, and no place beside the chosen future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat alone when the message reached him. No crowd surrounded him. No loud argument forced his hand. The appeal had arrived through a carefully handled private note, carried with the kind of quiet caution that told everyone near the monarch this was not ordinary family business. Meghan had asked for renewed royal recognition, not through public pressure, but through silence, through distance, through one last attempt to be seen before the palace fully turned toward another future. The royal line, meaning the direct family path expected to carry the crown forward, had already begun forming around William, Catherine, and their children. That made the request dangerous. It was not only about forgiveness, it was about whether the monarchy would open the door again after spending years trying to close it. Meghan felt the answer before she accepted it. The reply carried no warmth, no invitation, no hidden promise that time might soften the walls. She read the meaning in what was missing, and that absence struck harder than any public statement could have done. Harry stood inside the same shadow, because the rejection of her appeal also placed him outside the protected center of the family he was born into. This was why the moment mattered. It did not simply wound one woman. It confirmed who the palace believed belonged near the throne, and who had been moved beyond its inner circle. Charles placed the message flat on the desk. That small movement said what the palace had not dared to say loudly. The king had chosen. He had rejected Meghan's silent appeal for renewed recognition, and the palace confirmed that the royal line had made its choice. William, Catherine, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis would stand as the guarded future of the monarchy. Aides understood the shock immediately. This was not a cold family reply. It was a map of power. The closed door changed everything. Meghan's silence had finally been answered, but not with mercy. Charles had chosen the future he believed the crown could survive. And once the monarch made that choice, every person tied to the palace had to face what it meant for them personally. Behind the palace language were real people, real wounds, and real fear. Charles was not only a king defending the crown, he was a father deciding how far the door could remain open. Meghan was not only an outsider to the institution. She was a woman waiting to see whether silence could still reach a family that had learned to survive without her. Charles stood by the window after the decision, trying to look calm while the weight of it pressed against him. The crown, meaning the royal authority carried by the monarch and the family line behind him, demanded one answer. His heart remembered another. He knew Meghan's appeal had not arrived as a shout, and that made it harder to dismiss. She had chosen restraint. She had trusted quiet pain to speak for her. Yet the king also knew why the palace could not treat the moment as private sorrow alone. William's family now stood at the center of the monarchy's future, and any uncertainty around that center could shake the very structure Charles was trying to protect. Meghan received the answer without drama, but the stillness around her became its own kind of humiliation. She had not asked the palace to kneel. She had asked to be recognized in a way that might soften the distance. Instead, the reply told her that silence had not saved her from being pushed further away. Harry felt that wound beside her, because the refusal did not stop at his wife. It reached him too. It reminded him that birth could open a palace door, but trust decided whether that door stayed open. William entered the private room with his jaw tight and his words measured. He did not rush. He did not celebrate. The prince understood the cost of what had been decided, but he also understood why the decision mattered. If the palace placed his family at the heart of the next reign, then Catherine, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis had to be protected from old storms returning again and again. Catherine's power in that moment came from steadiness, not speech. She did not need to demand loyalty. Her calm made the choice feel visible. William looked at Charles and asked the question everyone feared. Had the decision already been sealed? The king did not answer quickly. That pause carried years inside it. It carried Harry's distance, Meghan's rejection, Catherine's quiet strength, and the future royal line being drawn around William's children. When Charles finally gave the smallest nod, the room changed. No one needed a louder confirmation. The choice did not appear from nowhere. It had been forming in silence, behind family pain and palace duty, until one private moment pushed the monarchy beyond repair. Every royal fracture has a moment people later pretend was smaller than it was. This one began behind polished doors during a private family ceremony, when a single absence, a single look, and a single request made the future impossible to ignore. By the time Meghan's silent appeal reached Charles, the palace had already remembered that earlier day as the point where patience finally broke. The room had turned cold during a private Windsor family blessing for Prince George's future role. The blessing was a quiet royal ceremony, meaning a private family gathering meant to mark duty, responsibility, and the path a young royal is expected to follow. George stood at the heart of it, and that made the moment matter, because everyone understood he was not just a child in that room. He represented the next chapter after William, the next face the monarchy would one day ask the public to trust. When Meghan's name was quietly raised in connection with possible family inclusion, the warmth drained away. No one needed to shout. Silence did the damage. Charles noticed William's face change first. The prince did not explode, and that restraint made the reaction more powerful. His jaw tightened. His eyes lowered for a second, then returned to the king with a look Charles could not ignore. This was no longer just about old family pain. It had moved into something deeper, something tied to the royal line and the safety of the children who would carry it. Catherine remained composed, but her silence was not empty. She watched William absorb the meaning of Meghan's name in that sacred family moment, and she understood what it threatened. The peace around George, Charlotte, and Louis. Harry raised the question later, and the wound opened again. He wanted to know why Meghan had been left outside the gathering, why her absence had been treated like a rule no one dared explain. His voice carried hurt, but it also carried challenge. Charles listened, and the king felt the old conflict return. Father against monarch, guilt against duty, memory against survival. Harry heard caution in the answer, and that caution only hardened him. Meghan was not in the room, yet she stood at the center of it through every pause. Charles sat with William after the ceremony, with no aides present and no soft words to hide behind. The king mentioned Meghan's name once, and then stopped. The prince did not answer quickly. That long pause became the real reply. It told Charles that any future appeal from her would be judged through the shadow of that Windsor day. The palace had not forgotten. William had not forgotten. Catherine had not forgotten what was placed at risk. Charles understood the danger then. If Meghan returned symbolically, even gently, even silently, the clean future forming around William's family could blur again. That fear followed the king into the next confrontation, where silence finally gave way to words no one could take back. The palace could hide announcements, soften statements, and polish every sentence for public consumption. But behind closed doors, there was no polish left. Charles faced the truth of his own decision. William stood firm beside the future he believed must be protected. And Meghan's appeal became the spark that forced the royal family to say aloud what they had avoided for too long. Charles looked at William as if the answer might still change if he waited long enough. The king had carried grief into that room. But grief could not give him a plan. The crown, meaning the power and duty attached to the monarch and the royal family's future, now demanded a line that could not bend every time old pain returned. That was why this moment mattered. If Charles softened now, the palace would look uncertain. If he refused, Harry would feel the wound deepen. The monarch knew both truths, and neither gave him peace. William did not raise his voice. That made him more dangerous. The prince stood across from his father with controlled emotion, choosing every word as if one wrong phrase could tear the family open again. He told Charles that mercy had a cost when it kept reopening the same wound. He reminded the king that Catherine had carried the weight of public pressure with quiet strength, and that George, Charlotte, and Louis could not grow up inside a future that kept shifting whenever Meghan's name returned to the table. William was not speaking out of cruelty. He was speaking out of fear for the line he would inherit. Charles felt the blow of it. Meghan's appeal had been silent, but the rejection would not stay silent in Harry's heart. The king understood that his younger son would see the decision as another locked door, another message that love had limits inside the palace. That knowledge cut deep, because Charles was not only defending the monarchy, he was deciding how much pain his own family could survive. The palace confirmation, meaning the prepared public position that would guide aides, courtiers, and royal messaging, had already been drafted before Meghan's appeal was fully answered. That secret changed everything. The machine had moved before the father had finished grieving. William saw the truth land on Charles's face. The prince knew his father wanted one last path that saved everyone, but no such path remained. Charles pushed back his chair. The sound seemed to cut through the room. He walked away from the desk, then stopped before turning back with a voice lower than anger and heavier than regret. The crown cannot be ruled by guilt. That sentence settled the confrontation. Charles had not simply disappointed Meghan. He had drawn the emotional border of his reign. William understood it. The king understood it. And behind that painful acceptance stood the machinery of power, where one human choice became palace policy. Power inside the monarchy rarely announces itself with noise. It appears in the lowered voice, the sealed folder, the careful sentence approved before dawn. Charles may have carried the title, but the decision around Meghan's appeal moved through a web of duty, fear, loyalty, and calculation. Somewhere inside that web, one truth became impossible to ignore. The line had to be protected first. Charles read the final palace wording once, then read it again with the slow focus of a man searching for a softer path. The palace wording, meaning the approved message that guides what the royal household can say and how aides must explain a decision, carried no open cruelty. That made it even stronger. It confirmed that the royal line's choice had been made, and that William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis stood as the monarchy's next emotional and constitutional foundation. Fourier of the Seas, my 10. Constitutional foundation meant the family structure the crown depends on for continuity, public trust, and future leadership. Charles understood why this mattered. If the palace looked unsure about the Wales family, the whole future would look unsure. If Meghan's appeal reopened old uncertainty, the children at the center of the next reign would inherit a storm instead of a stable path. A senior courtier watched the king hesitate. The courtier, a trusted palace official who helps manage royal decisions behind closed doors, did not speak because Charles's face already revealed too much. The monarch was not enjoying power. He was grieving the cost of using it. The courtier saw his hand pause above one sentence, the line confirming that the future of the monarchy now rested around William's household. That pause mattered because it showed the decision was not simply office work. It was a father accepting that private repair could not outrank succession clarity, and succession meant the order by which the crown passes from one generation to the next. Camilla felt the room change before anyone explained it to her. She had seen Charles carry guilt before, but this was different. The queen consort understood that he had chosen stability over reconciliation, even if that choice left Harry wounded and Meghan pushed further from the center. Camilla did not challenge him. She watched him carry the silence, and in that silence she recognized a painful truth. The king had stopped looking for a way to please everyone. Charles removed his glasses and placed them beside the statement. The movement was small, but the meaning was brutal. He asked for no further changes, no warmer sentence, no hidden opening, no extra line to soften the rejection. The senior courtier lowered his eyes, knowing the decision had crossed from private pain into palace policy. The sealed wording now had a life of its own. Camilla knew it. Charles knew it. Once the king approved those words, Meghan's rejection could no longer remain private. And when private pain became palace language, the first consequences struck faster than anyone expected. The palace did not need a long announcement to change everything. A few careful lines were enough. The moment confirmation moved through royal circles, the temperature shifted. Phones went quiet. Aides stopped speculating. And far from the palace, Meghan was left staring at the meaning of a decision that had not shouted her name, but had still answered her completely. Meghan read the confirmation slowly, as if a slower reading might reveal mercy hidden between the words. It did not. The confirmation, meaning the official palace position approved for private circulation before wider understanding followed, did more than reject her appeal. It turned the rejection into a symbol. Charles had not simply declined one request. The king had allowed the palace to show where trust now lived, and where it no longer did. That was why the moment mattered. A private no could have remained a wound between people. This became a marker inside the monarchy, a sign that the center had moved fully toward William's family. Harry felt the anger rise before he found the words for it. He saw what Meghan saw, but his pain carried a different history. To him, the palace wording made the rejection feel larger than one message, larger than one appeal, larger than one painful season. It touched every old argument about belonging, loyalty, and whether his life outside the royal center had become impossible to repair. Meghan stayed quiet, but the silence around her was not calm. It was the kind of silence that comes when humiliation has landed too deeply for speech. Charles remained composed when the statement was circulated, but the composure cost him. The monarch stood after the final copy moved through the palace chain, then found he could not sit back down. That single hesitation revealed more than any confession. He understood the consequence. Meghan would feel pushed away. Harry would feel punished. Yet he also knew why the decision had been made. The royal household, meaning the organized staff and offices that support the monarch and manage royal work, needed clarity. Without it, every future event, invitation, and family appearance could become another battlefield. William felt relief, but sadness followed close behind. The prince knew the line was clearer now, and that clarity protected Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis from being pulled into another cycle of uncertainty. Still, the victory did not feel clean. Catherine saw it in his face before he spoke. She steadied him in a brief private exchange, reminding him that strength did not mean pretending the fracture was painless. Her calm mattered because it gave William something the palace language could not provide, a human reason to keep walking forward. The truth became impossible to soften. The palace had not merely denied Meghan's appeal, it had confirmed a hierarchy of trust around the Wales family, and everyone understood the message. Charles knew it. Harry felt it. Meghan carried it. William accepted it. But one private conversation still had the power to soften the emotional damage, even if it could not reverse the decision. That conversation came when the palace noise fell away, leaving only two people and the truth between them. Not every turning point comes with raised voices. Sometimes it comes in a room where no aides are present, where titles feel too heavy, and where two people speak not as symbols but as family. After the rejection, Charles faced the one truth palace language could not hide. He had protected the crown, but he had wounded flesh and blood to do it. Charles entered the room with the slow weight of a man who had already won and lost in the same breath. William was waiting. Not stiff with anger, but still with purpose. The aides were gone, and that absence mattered, because no one could translate pain into careful language now. The crown, meaning the power and duty carried by the monarch and the royal family's future, had been protected on paper. But paper did not soften what the king had done. Meghan's appeal had been rejected. Harry's distance had been confirmed. William's family had been placed at the center. Charles knew the decision had saved one part of the monarchy, while cutting another part deeper than before. William watched his father carefully. The prince did not rush to comfort him, because comfort would have sounded false. He understood why the rejection had to stand, but he also understood the human cost behind it. Charles admitted, in a voice stripped of ceremony, that the decision had taken something from him as a father. He had not wanted to answer Meghan with coldness. He had not wanted Harry to feel pushed even farther away. Yet the king believed the monarchy could no longer survive if every boundary was treated as temporary, every wound reopened, every private appeal allowed to bend the future. William answered with quiet resolve. He told Charles that mercy could not become confusion, and kindness could not mean placing Catherine and the children back inside a storm they had not created. The future royal line, meaning the direct path of heirs who will carry the monarchy forward, needed calm around it. George, Charlotte, and Louis could not grow up wondering whether old conflicts would return each time the palace tried to move on. That was why this moment mattered. It was not only about Meghan. It was about the kind of reign William would one day inherit, and whether that reign would begin with strength or with unfinished damage. Charles placed his hand on the back of a chair, steadying himself before the final truth left his mouth. Meghan's appeal could not change the future. The words did not sound cruel. They sounded exhausted. William heard them and understood that his father had stopped seeing the rejection as punishment. The king now saw it as protection, not just of his reign, but of the next one. The agreement between them was not joyful. It was serious, heavy, and final. Charles had chosen. William had accepted. And outside the palace gates, the world was already turning one private rejection into a national judgment. By morning, the story no longer belonged only to the palace. It had crossed into headlines, broadcasts, street conversations, and living rooms, where royal loyalty turned into argument. Meghan's silent appeal had been rejected behind palace walls, but the meaning of that rejection was now being fought in public, where every face, every phrase, and every front page sharpened the divide. A London newspaper carried the moment like a verdict. Across the front page, the headline read, "The line has chosen," placed beside Charles, William, Catherine, and Meghan, in a layout that made the separation impossible to miss. The royal line, meaning the direct family path expected to carry the crown into the future, was no longer just palace language. It had become a public symbol. That mattered, because people could understand one thing instantly. The monarchy was no longer trying to hold every broken piece together. Charles had chosen protection over repair, and Meghan had become the face of what that protection had left outside. A broadcaster framed the story with sharp certainty during the morning program. He called it the clearest sign yet that the monarchy had moved from family healing to succession protection, meaning the palace was now focused on keeping the future of the throne stable instead of reopening painful personal disputes. Then a royal commentator, speaking on air during a recorded panel discussion, delivered the line that cut through the noise. This is not just a no to Meghan. This is a yes to William's future. The words spread because they were simple. They gave the public a sentence for what many had already felt. A crowd gathered near Buckingham Palace, and the argument followed them there. Some defended Charles, saying the king had done what any monarch must do when the future feels fragile. Others shook their heads and said Meghan's rejection felt unnecessarily cold, especially because her appeal had been silent, not public, not forceful, not designed to embarrass the crown. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's central London residence and a symbol of royal authority, became more than a building in that moment. It became the place where people imagined the family door closing. Meghan became a symbol of exclusion to those who saw the decision as emotional punishment. Catherine became a symbol of continuity to those who believed calm had to win over chaos. William stood at the center of that divide, praised by some as the protected future, and judged by others as the reason reconciliation had failed. Charles faced the hardest scrutiny of all, because strength and cruelty can look dangerously similar from a distance. The public noise rose quickly, but it could not change the private decision. Charles had accepted the cost. Meghan had received the answer. William's future had been named without apology, and when the shouting softened and the headlines moved on, one truth remained inside the monarchy, heavier than all the rest. In the end, the rejection was not only about Meghan, it was about the monarchy deciding what it could no longer carry. Charles did not choose cruelty for its own sake, and Meghan did not appeal without pain. But when the crown was forced to choose between reopening an old wound and protecting the line ahead, the answer came with unmistakable finality. Charles understood the weight of what he had done after the noise faded. The crown, meaning the power, duty, and future responsibility carried by the monarch, had demanded certainty from him. Meghan's silent appeal had asked for recognition, but recognition was no longer a private kindness. It had become a public signal, a message about who could stand near the center and who could not. That was why the rejection mattered. If Charles reopened the door, the palace risked dragging William's family back into old conflict. If he kept it closed, Harry and Meghan would carry the pain of being left outside. The king chose the wound he believed the monarchy could survive. Meghan's conclusion was painful because it was clear. Her silence had been answered, but the answer confirmed that her place near the royal center had closed. She had not forced a public showdown. She had not turned the appeal into a spectacle. Yet the palace response still reached her like a final judgment. Harry felt that judgment beside her, because love, anger, and memory could not automatically rebuild institutional trust. Institutional trust, meaning the confidence the palace places in someone to protect royal duty, public order, and the future line, had become the hidden wall neither emotion nor history could break down. William emerged from the decision as the protected future, but not as a man untouched by the cost. The prince knew stability had been chosen around him: Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. He also knew that stability had come through suffering. Catherine's quiet strength became central to the final verdict, because she represented the calm continuity the palace wanted the public to trust. She did not need to fight for that place. Her steadiness had already spoken for her. William understood that the monarchy was not rewarding comfort. It was protecting the family it believed would carry the next chapter with discipline and restraint. Charles looked one last time at the approved palace wording. The statement, meaning the final language accepted by the royal household to define the decision, sat before him like a sealed ending. He closed the folder and left it behind on the desk. That small act carried the whole truth. The monarch had stopped trying to balance two competing futures. He had chosen one. There is no unresolved ending here. Charles chose the line. Meghan received the answer. William's future was protected. Catherine's place became stronger through silence. And Harry was left facing the distance that no anger could erase. The monarchy paid for certainty with a wound it will never fully forget. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.